everyone, and welcome to the video. I'm Dr. Gale. It's good to have you here today. So what we want to talk about today is looking at interactive lesson development, and we're going to start talking about how we move from what is determined the basics of it into what some of the advanced features are. What are the things that we can look forward to doing and building if we continue to grow in this area. Now realize that everybody's going to define what basic versus advanced versus expert versus all of that is. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you kind of the way that I think about it as I've taught this before and as I've played around with the softwares, and just kind of give you guys a heads up of where that differentiation is. And again, if nothing else, if you're at that basic level, it'll help you kind of be able to see what's going to be coming down the road, again, if you decide to keep pursuing using these type of softwares to develop interactive lessons. And again, the softwares we're talking about are going to be something like Articulate Storyline or Adobe Captivate, but all of them basically have the same kind of basic features and advanced features. They may just be called something a little different, but they all work the same. So again, what we're going to be talking about today is giving you a preview of what is happening with advanced lesson development using some of these softwares. Hopefully what we'll do today is kind of start out talking to you about what the basics are, things that are very lower level novice on these softwares. Then we're going to start branching into what you'll be able to do with the advanced type features in these softwares, some of the things that you can do at the next level. Then we're going to kind of talk about the way you would think through some of the advanced levels as you start trying to develop some of that stuff out. And then finally we'll take a look at the benefits that would come with trying to move up into the advanced levels. So to start, let's go ahead and set our baseline by talking about what the basic features are, the basic level of being able to develop in these lesson development softwares. So when we're talking about the basic level, what we're looking at is you have the ability to kind of put in some static images, some static text, make it look pretty nice in there, but you're not going to have anything really more than that. It's basically going to be a PowerPoint that has been amplified at this point. Your navigation structure will probably be mostly like you have to click on a button, build these type of things in. Everything that you do in there, navigation, interaction, stuff like that, is going to be clicking on things. So you'll build a button in there and then you'll end up clicking over it. Now the button may be interactive and kind of change colors as you hover over it, things like that, which is awesome. But it's still going to be something I've got to click on to be able to do, let go of the mouse and then maneuver on. This really sets up for a linear type of lesson. You can have branches and then come back to a main point, things like that, but ultimately it's going to be story driven because you have static text, you have static things that are happening in there. So even if you have a branch, it's always going to be the same text. If you come to this branch, always the same text on this branch. You'll be able to come back, but it's always the same thing. That's why it's static. Also, when you start getting into your assessment level on the basic side, you're probably going to mostly use the pre-built assessments, some of the pre-built questions, multiple choice, true, false, things like that, that will run on its own separate slide as you guys kind of build those parts out. So that's a lot of the basic type of stuff. So what do we have to look forward to if we end up going forward pursuing out like more advanced features and building our skill set up? Well, looking at some of the advanced features, one of the things we're not going to play around with just static and images and text anymore. Now we're going to be able to start having some motion in there and some animation. We're going to end up having our characters be able to move around, talk, bubbles pop up and go away, things like that. We're going to make it look a lot more fluid, not just like a PowerPoint slide anymore. So being able to add that animation and motion is going to give a good visual appeal that the basic level really just doesn't kind of toy around with at that point. You're also going to be able to start having a variety of interactions. So no longer is it going to be I have to click on the button to make things happen. Now we're going to be able to do something more like just hover states, where if you move your mouse over something, something happens somewhere else on the screen. It's not just a button changing colors, but it's actually triggering other layers to maneuver. You'll also be able to have more interactions like a drag and drop, where you can start dragging and dropping items and things to be able to kind of determine where they go and kind of assess the users, which is another piece. Now we're going to be able to have various types of assessments. We no longer have to just have multiple choice questions. We no longer just have to have true false questions. Now we can have a drag and drop interaction and score those points based on how well they're doing on the drag and dropping. You also have a more variety of ways to be able to score because it's going to be playing around and carrying variables around. And all that means at this point is it no longer has to be a one answer gives you 10 points, one answer gives you 5 points. Now it can be, okay, they've gotten 5 in a row, so maybe we're going to give them bonus points and stuff. All of that is able to be done with variables and math on the back side of it that you would never see on the front side of the lesson. So your assessment options, your interactions, your instructions, you just have a wider range of things that you can end up doing once you get into those advanced options just with the introduction of variables. One other thing is in the pre-built test, you're really kind of playing around with like one area inside of a lesson. So you might quiz them on this one thing they read, and then you might quiz them here on this one thing. Now you can do overall global arching things where it's like the whole lesson is being assessed as well as these little pieces, because you're no longer relying on just that one quiz at the end to be able to do things. You can carry through based on decisions and bonus points and all that, because it's all stored in a variable. So again, just know that that's what that word is. We'll talk about that later on in videos if you want to go more advanced, but it just opens your doors of what you can possibly do. Now again, where the basics had a very linear path, now in the advanced areas you're going to be able to have more of a constructivist path, and that's because again you do have variables. You have things where they can make decisions, and based on the decisions it might take them to different places. We'll talk a little bit more about that here when we get into the mechanics. But again, the thing to know here is on advanced, you can really go into constructivism where they try different things, restart the lesson, try new things, and it's different for them. It's no longer the, I'm going to go here, read this text, come back, read this text, read this text. Now it could branch off into all kinds of crazy places, give all kinds of crazy examples. So let's go ahead and take a real quick look. Now that you know what some of the advanced options are, how does that work out? How do we think through that? Let's get into the very, very first steps of thinking through some of the advanced levels and how we would work through those things as we start building out the lessons. So when thinking about the thought process through this, what we need to start doing is, first off, again, you're going to have the ability to branch into things that we didn't get to do before. So again, linear to constructivism, now we can start building out stories and scenarios. We can have them run through different paths where maybe if they made these decisions, it got them to this endpoint, end of the lesson. But if they replay it, they'll take some different options and they'll get down to this path and replay it. So again, you can really start thinking of stories, because with them making decisions, it will more easily push them along a path that a story would naturally gravitate towards. So you're telling a story and then they come up to this point of a what would you do, kind of like those old school books of what would you do. They make that decision and boom, all of a sudden it's branching off over here and branching off over here. So really start thinking about it through the story and the possibilities you can get with that. It's pretty cool if you can make that in there. It gets it a lot more interactive and engaging for students. Now again, I've been talking about you have variables. So basically a variable is just a storage unit on the back side, but whenever somebody does something, it means that we can store that information inside of a variable and start doing calculations, mechanics, manipulation of that on the outside to make something else happen on the inside. So again, the example was, say they got 5 drag and drop items right. Well, okay, that initiates a bonus. So where they were getting 1 point for each, now for the next 5 that they get right, they'll get 5 points each. And all of a sudden they start getting these bonus scores. You can start getting elements of gamification in there that you can get. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can build in when we have the ability to actually manipulate and store data on the side to make things happen in the live thing that they see. So variables are going to be awesome. It helps you track things throughout the entire lesson or little mini pieces of the lesson. The variables really, really help when you start wanting to try and get into some of these advanced things. Another thing with variables is you can insert random chance, because you can have random variables. And that's where, again, gamification, some of these scenario branchings, the things can happen, and it makes it completely different if they want to replay the lesson. So if you're playing board games or something like that, you'll almost always have some kind of random chance element in there so that you go back and you play the board game again. So for example, you may have a dice roll, and that dice is going to be a random chance something, but whatever happens with that dice impacts what you're doing in the game. You might have some kind of cards that are flipped. If you're only dealt 5 cards out of a 52 card stack, that means you're going to have random chance in there of what 5 cards you have. But there's almost always some kind of random element inside of games that, again, you can try and build and strategize around that, but something may happen just based on the random chance. That's why we really enjoy replaying games. Well, once we start playing around with variables, you can start inserting random elements into the storyline lessons. So again, it may be something's happening and random chance says, hey, if the dice rolls a 1 or a 4, you're going to get this scenario. 1 or 4, you get this scenario. 3 and 6, you get this scenario. So basically, based on a dice roll or a random number in there, it's going to determine that you get different scenarios. So now when I replay it, I have different things that may happen. You know, I still have a certain number of pre-builds, but depending on how many pre-builds you build in there, it's very random. Then you'll be able to add things in there that aren't as pre-built. So for example, let's say we're doing a math lesson and we want them to do some practice questions on Pythagorean theorem. So we got our a squared, b squared, c squared. We give them 2 of them. You got to go find the c squared or whatever. all of a sudden we can say that the A and the B are going to be randomly generated. So the first time they take the test, it's a 10 and a 5. The second time they take it, it's a 27 and a 13. All of a sudden the random numbers are playing in there, and we just created, I don't know, say like 100 examples off of us really just building one and then letting the random numbers go ahead and populate in there. So again, really powerful stuff, especially on the kind of monitoring the progress, the reviewing whether or not they got the concepts. You can really build some cool things in there with random chance variables. Lastly, what you'll have is now you can do individual scores like what those quizzes were doing, but again with variables like I had mentioned earlier, we can track over the entire duration of a lesson. So you can have a huge, massive lesson where they've got activities and interactions going all over the place. Say we're building a training scenario for a new software and we have them clicking through here, we can tell that they know this, clicking over here, that's all of a sudden all that can be tracked into like an overall score. So with the variables we can track not only did they get this piece and this piece and this piece, but did they get the whole picture, or if they didn't, which part of the picture are they struggling at. So again, you've got much stronger abilities to end up tracking your assessments and stuff if you guys end up using the global variables that can go over an entire lesson. I mean, you can really start building some powerful stuff out of this. So with that being said, as we kind of talk through the thought process, and again, there'll be other videos on how to do a lot of this and kind of breaking those individual elements down as you build it up. But for right now, what are the benefits of this? Why are we even talking about this? Can't I just stop at the basic level and not have to worry about moving to the advanced level? Well, yes and no, but there are a lot of benefits if you continue on and start getting these advanced skills. One is you can make the lessons a lot more engaging. Again, it kind of gets a little bit rote after a while, dragging of, hey, let me click here, let me click here. Now all of a sudden I've got drag and drops. I'm really having to start thinking about it. I'm having to maneuver things around. A story's being told to me. The characters are moving around. It's a lot more engaging for me. Again, we also have replayability. So if we're using those random numbers, like I said earlier, we could go in and do a practice lesson on Pythagorean, and all of a sudden I can take that 100 times and I may never get a duplicate of that same random number depending on what it is. So all of a sudden I've got 100 unique examples that I can keep going through. I can go through that game and try as 20 times to get every scenario, and I may still not have them, but it's a different scenario. It makes me think a lot harder. I want to replay it to see if I can get a better score. Things like that are all able to be built in on these advanced levels. Also, the advanced levels allow you to really start, since we have the variables that can kind of cover global area, it starts letting us branch out into these bigger lessons. So I don't just have to make one little piece of content here and then stick it in an LMS, a little piece of content here, stick it on a website. I can make one big lesson that holds all of that stuff and stores the variables so that they can maneuver through it. All we got to do is just kind of be considerate of time on the user side at that point. And then lastly, it's really going to start pushing them, if you build these right, into higher levels of cognition. It's no longer let me read, take a little quiz, read, take a quiz. It's not that memorization process. If you start building in scenarios and it branches off and they're going to end up replaying it to hit other scenarios, they really are going to have to start thinking through that scenario and thinking of what they would do. It's going to push them into more of like analyzing problems rather than just memorizing. There's a difference if I have to teach like a sexual harassment policy for an HR organization. There's going to be a difference between me just putting the text out there, having them read it and answer 3 questions, versus here's the text, now here's a scenario, what would you do in this scenario? Okay, you did that, this is what happened, now what would you do? Now all of a sudden it's making them really think and put themselves in that situation so that they can kind of just see how it would work out if they were really there in real life. That's pushing them into, man, I'm actually having to think about this. No longer is it just, okay, check mark, check mark, check mark. So the higher levels of cognition really start growing as you guys build out the advanced lesson features. So those are just some of the benefits. And again, I wanted to kind of make sure that I at least defined out what I feel like are the basics and the advanced levels that you can do with these different software systems. Again, Adobe Captivate, Articulate Storyline, they both have the ability to do features like this on the back end. Just the mechanics of how to do them are different. So if nothing else, I hope out of this it's excited you a little bit about the possibilities of progressing your skills on these types of softwares. If nothing else, I hope that you guys kind of get a little bit of the thought process and the possibilities that may exist if you decide to move forward with these skills, and then you can at least see some of the benefits of it. And again, hopefully in the end you're encouraged to be able to try out and move forward building up the skill sets as well. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and wrap this up because it's getting a little bit long. But if you guys have any questions on any of it, or if you have questions on anything design, development, ed tech related, please feel free to send them to us. We're always trying to put out new videos to get you guys more information on how to make things stronger in your classes and for your students. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you like, and that way if we do create some new content out, it's always pushed to you pretty quick, and then you guys can decide whether or not it's something for you in your classroom. In the end, we just want to make sure that we give you guys the tools and the techniques to try and make the strongest experience possible for your students as they progress throughout that academic career. So with that being said, let us know if you have anything, and we appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and hear out the lesson for the day. Have a good one, guys. Look forward to seeing you the next time.